Hi everyone, it's Alexa with TCB. Thank you so much for joining us for our candle lesson today. We are so excited to be with you all, walking you through the process of how to pour your own candles. Here at TCB, we love to celebrate everything and bring people together, and candles are a great cozy way to do that. So let's get started. Come join me as we learn how to pour our own candles today. Okay, so let's talk through what we included in your candle making kit. And then we'll go over a couple of things to grab from your own kitchens, and then we will pour our candles together. So first off, inside your candle kit, you should have received a pouring guide, which has all of our instructions written out. So if at any point you would like to reference those, you are welcome to do that. Next up, you should have received 3 candle vessels, 2 small and 1 large. Our smaller vessels are going to make candles that will burn for anywhere between 25 to 38 hours, and our larger vessel will create candles that will burn anywhere from about 30 to 55. So we'll get a lot of good hours of burn time out of our candles today. You should also have received your wicks. So you'll get 1 larger wick that will be used with our larger vessel, and then 2 smaller wicks that will go with our smaller vessels right here. And these wicks are a blend of cotton and paper, and they are triple dipped in beeswax, which is a great composition for beginner candle makers. It should burn nice and clean. We also have a fragrance oil. This is optional, but if you would like to add some fragrance to your candles, I'll walk you through how to do that. We also have our spoon that'll help us stir our fragrance into our hot wax, and then we'll have some wick stickers to help us stick the wicks to the bottom of the candle vessels. And the last thing is you'll have some wick setters. These wick setters are going to be helpful for us to make sure that those wicks are nice and centered as the candles cure or harden over the course of a few hours. And then, of course, we have our candle wax. So our candle wax is going to be a mix of soy and coconut. This is a great beginner-friendly wax to use when you're pouring your candles. It should result in a nice, clean burn. It's also water-soluble, so if you happen to have a little spill today, you can clean it up with a little bit of soap and water. We always recommend a soy coconut blend for our beginner candle makers. So that should be in your kit. Those are all the supplies that you need today. And then from your own kitchen or your own home, just a couple of things you might find helpful. First off is a pair of scissors in case you need some help opening any of the packaging, and then also to trim your wicks once your candles are ready. You may also find that a microfiber towel or cloth is helpful to just kind of make sure our candle containers are clean before we pour wax into them. And then the last thing is a pair of oven mitts or some kind of heat resistant gloves. These are going to be super helpful because we will be working with hot wax today, and safety is very, very important. So we always want to make sure that we're taking precautions to avoid burning ourselves. If you have little ones helping you out, they may want to hold back on that part, and maybe the adults can be the ones to handle the hot wax. So please make sure that you are working from a standpoint of safety first today, and let's get started. Okay, so to get started, the first thing we're going to do is give ourselves a little bit of space to work. So I'm going to move some of my supplies off to the side for now. And we're going to want to set up in an area that we can maybe get a little bit messy, and that we will have nice access to a microwave close by, because we're going to be microwaving our wax today. So I'm going to clear some area right here, give myself some space to work. And the very first thing that I'm going to do with my candles is I want to center the wicks. And what that means is I want the wicks to be right in the center of the vessel. That is really important, because if we have wicks that are not centered, what's going to happen is as we start to burn our candles, it's going to create kind of an uneven melt pool, and you're going to get a lot more hot wax on one side of the candle than the other. So we always want to try to center our wicks right in the middle as best we can. So what I'm going to do to prep my vessels is just kind of gather them in front of me right here. I'll remove the lids of the 2 smaller ones, and then I'll use my microfiber cloth to get rid of any residue that's inside. We want to clean that out to make sure that there's nothing else that goes into our candle, so that it's nice and clean. Perfect. And we'll give these guys a little wipe down as well. Okay, awesome. And once our candles have been cleaned, then we're going to center our wicks. So as a reminder, you should have 2 shorter wicks for your smaller vessels and 1 larger one for your larger vessel. And what we'll do here is we'll start with our larger vessel, and I'm going to take my longer wick, and I'm also going to grab my wick stickers. And what I'll do to help me stick the wick to the bottom of the vessel is I will pull off this little tab right here to expose the sticky side. And then I will take my wick and I will just stick it right onto that sticker. And then I will peel off the backing. And that should create a nice sticky surface to stick it into the vessel. So then I'm gonna just very carefully position it as close to the center as I can in the bottom of that vessel and give it a couple presses to make sure that it is stuck nicely, just like that. So we'll make sure the wick is nice and centered. And then we're gonna repeat the same thing for our smaller vessels. So I'll use my smaller wick, peel off the tab, stick it, and then peel off the backing. It should come off nice and clean. And I'm gonna position it in the center as best as I can. And then we will repeat the process for our remaining vessel. So peel off the tab. We will stick it to the wick. And then we'll peel off the back and stick it right in the center. Give it a good couple press. Okay, so all of our vessels have been prepped. And so the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna melt our wax. A couple of things to make sure that I mention about that. When you are melting your wax, it is really important to make sure that it has a proper place to vent. So I'm gonna go ahead and open this container to make sure that it vents properly as it heats up. Always want to make sure we're working with an open container. There we go. The bag is open. And then if you have a smaller microwave, you could cut off a little bit of the top of this if it's too tall to fit inside your microwave. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be microwaving this wax for a total of about 2.5 to 3 minutes. Depending on the strength of your microwave, it might need to be a little bit more or a little bit less. But we're gonna microwave this in 30-second increments until it is fully melted. So we want to see all liquid. We don't wanna have any white clumps of unmelted wax. It should be a nice soft yellow whenever it's all melted. And it will be very hot. So please take precautions when you are handling this hot wax. And so again, we're gonna microwave this for around 2.5 to 3 minutes, depending on your microwave, in 30-second intervals until it is fully melted. And I'm gonna go microwave mine. I'll come back with fully melted wax and we will go over the next steps. Okay, so once your wax is fully melted and liquid like this, we're going to pour it very slowly into each vessel one at a time. And so what we'll do is we'll pour the wax into our first vessel. If you would like to add some fragrance into that vessel, go ahead and do that, stir it up before you move on to the next vessel. And so I'm gonna start with my largest vessel. So we'll move my smaller vessels out of the way for a second here. And as a reminder, this is very hot, so please be careful. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of take my bag and kind of create a little spout and pour very carefully and very slowly into my container. And I want to fill this up all the way and leave about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch gap at the top. And the reason for that is because the wax is going to expand a little bit as it cures. So I definitely want to leave some space for that to happen. And so you can see there's a little bit of space there at the top to account for that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fragrance oil, and you can determine how much scent you would like to add. This oil is enough for all 3 candles. And so because these are about twice as large as these smaller ones, I'm going to add a little bit more in here, and I'm going to pour about half of this container right in. You could absolutely do a little bit less if you want your fragrance to be a little bit lighter. There we go. So we'll pour that in very slowly, and then we'll use our wooden spoon to just stir it and make sure it is well incorporated. If you decide to continue on your candle making journey, one of the things that you'll want to get is some kind of double boiler to be able to melt wax on your stovetop, and then also a thermometer to make sure that it is at the correct temperature. So one of the things that candle makers do is they combine art and science to make sure they're getting a really good combination of wax and scents as they are pouring their candles. And the temperature that the wax needs to be in order to create a really nice flow kind of depends on the fragrance that you're using and the type of wax. But generally we like the wax to be heated to about 185 degrees Fahrenheit, and then for it to cool slightly, and then add the oil. And that allows for the molecules of the wax to really open up and bind very nicely to the fragrance. So what I'm doing here is I'm just stirring slowly until it no longer looks oily, and that's how I know that my oil is nice and combined. So we'll stir that right in. There we go. We'll tap off some excess. And then we'll move on and repeat the process with our smaller vessels. Please keep in mind that these will be very hot whenever you touch them, so please be careful. And we're gonna pour this very slowly into the smaller one. These smaller vessels have a little bit of a ridge near the top, so you can just pour until you reach that little ridge. You should be good. There we go. And I'm gonna add a small amount of fragrance here to this one as well. And I'll save a little bit for my last candle. And so again, I'm just gonna stir very carefully until it no longer looks oily in there. And that's how I'll know the fragrance is well combined. It smells wonderful. I'm relaxed already. Okay, that looks nice and combined, so I'll gently tap to add any drips back into the candle. Again, these will be very hot to the touch, so please move with care. And then our last candle, repeat the process. So pour very slowly, all the way up into the ridge. There we go. And you may have a little bit of wax left in your container. That's totally fine. If you want to go back and top off any of the other ones, you can, or you may have just enough. And then I'm going to pour the fragrance right in and give it a nice stir. One of the most common questions that we get is whether it is okay to just add essential oils that you have at home into your candles. And the answer is no. So that is, it's really important to make sure that we are only using fragrance oils that are designed for candles. The reason is that essential oils tend to have a much lower flash point than fragrance oils, and so there's a potential for the candle to ignite and create a really big flame if you use an essential oil. So please only use fragrance oils that are designed for candles when you are making your own at home. If you have any oil remaining, what you can do is you can add it to some distilled water to create a nice room spray, or you can add it to a dryer ball, or you could make more candles, which is always a good idea. Okay, so now that our candles have been poured, what we're gonna do is we're going to use our wick setters to make sure that our wicks stay nice and centered as the candles cure. So we're gonna use these popsicle sticks with the hole in the middle, but you could also use a clothespin. You could use 2 chopsticks, 2 pencils, anything that's gonna help you just kind of stabilize your wicks and keep them nice and centered. So what I'll do here is with my largest vessel, I will just kind of feed that wick right through the little center hole. And then I will make it as centered as possible so that it cures nice and straight in the middle there. And we really want to make sure that we are centering our wicks because, again, it's going to create a really nice even melt pool as you burn your candles. One of the things that is characteristic of soy wax is that it has a memory. And so what that means is when you light your candles and you burn them for the first time, the melt pool that is created, kind of the melted wax that appears in the middle of your candle, it's going to remember how far it burned the time before, and it's only going to burn that far the next time. So we want to always make sure that when we're burning our soy wax candles that we burn them all the way to the edge. We want to try to avoid blowing them out whenever they've only melted part way across. so that we create a nice even melt pool and we get the most life out of our candles as we can. Okay, so now that our wicks are centered, we are going to let the candles rest and cure. And what that means is that wax is going to harden and it's going to turn back into kind of that milky white color that our flakes were at the beginning. And as that process happens, as they cure slowly, we want to try to leave them undisturbed. So if there's a way that they can be put in an area that's going to not be super drafty, not going to be super cold, an area where they can kind of dry slowly would be ideal and not be touched and moved around a bunch. After about 24 hours of cure time, our candles will look like regular candles, and at that point you can trim the wicks. So you can take your pair of scissors, you can snip the wick until there's about 1/4 of an inch exposed at the top of the candle, and at that point you could burn the candle if you would like to. However, if you really want to get the maximum burn time out of your candles, we do want to let them cure for a little bit longer. So I would say about 72 hours from now is when your candles have been fully cured and you're going to get the best burn time out of them. So 24 hours to trim, and you could burn them if you want to, but 72 hours is best to wait. And so you'll also want to make sure that every time you light your candles, you burn them all the way to the edge if you can, and you always want to trim the wicks before each light. Sometimes we can get wicks that will tend to be a little bit long or develop a little bit of a kind of a black bulb at the top. That is an excess of carbon that has built up on your candles, and we want to try to remove that as often as possible. So it really is best practice to trim your wicks in between each burn. But other than that, our candles are going to set, they're going to cure, and in about 24 to 72 hours, they're going to be ready to burn and enjoy. And that's all there is to it. Pouring your own candles is super easy, super fun, and super rewarding. We hope you guys enjoy it as much as we did. Thank you so much for joining us. And now the best part, you get to enjoy your beautiful, relaxing candles. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye!